Good morning, everybody. Rise and shine. It's Tuesday. Good morning, y'all. So I wanted to come and talk to y'all before I already logged in, but before I really get started working, because I got some things I gotta do today. So I probably will be able to come back and talk to you guys later on this today, but I wanted to get this out the way. So before I talk about what I posted last night about Jarvis, and there being another mentally challenged person that was on the calls. I want to talk about Kiwana. Okay. So Kiwana, anybody who has been following this Jarvis Butts case with us, with Nazaria Harris was the victim, and she was the niece of one of Jarvis's baby mamas. Excuse me, guys. Jarvis had been molesting her, and she ended up pregnant. And prior to him turning himself in on a gun charge, he unalived her because he did not want her to end up giving birth while I guess he was incarcerated for the 9 to 10 months that he was supposed to be in there. And hey, Just V, good morning. Okay. Listening to the calls. Yeah, okay. Yes, I'm about to talk about the call, but first I want to talk about Kiwana. Did you get a chance to watch her live? So I didn't watch all of Kiwana live, y'all, but I can understand how Janelle and Kiwana feel about the situation, right? You said I can't imagine having a 22-year-old daughter, um, and I'm sitting up talking to a man in jail. Right. That one was crazy. Okay. But that was probably another contributor. Because he had to get them older women in order to be the contributors, right? But I want to talk about Kiwana's live because I can understand how Janelle and Kiwana feel about the kids potentially hearing all of this content and how it makes them feel and all of those kind of things. But Janelle kind of wants to, I hate this, I hate to say this. She wants to be able to control how everybody else is putting out content surrounding this situation, right? And so she started off expressing that she had an issue with the content creators that released certain calls on Mother's Day, and that was insensitive to the kids, and that they couldn't even give the kids that day for them to even like try to work through whatever struggle they might be dealing with, being is that it was Mother's Day and they were separated from their mom, and then what happened with their dad and the whole grandma and the whole situation. And she was explaining that, despite the fact that um what all of the things that happen, it is hard to make kids hate their parents, and so she was saying that she felt, you say, why does he make such a big deal about having to say his name for the cause? If I hear friends and family one more time, I'm jumping off the curb. Exactly. Like that blows me. But look, Just be, I'm gonna get into that, but I want to talk about Kiwana's live first. Did you get a chance to see that? You are in jail, sir. Just be grateful. So listen, I don't know if he think not saying his name is gonna make it that if something is said on the call that it's not attached to him. I don't know what he think. I, that's why I said I'll go back to that because I think some kind of way it got something to do with him thinking he being city slick. I don't know. You said no, I didn't hear the live. I had to get some. Okay, yeah. So I was listening to it this morning while I was taking a shower to some of Kiwana's live. I didn't listen to the whole thing because I knew what it. You could tell from the first couple of minutes what it was, And what it is that Kiwana is in her feelings. You thought the same thing about the Mother's Day thing? Oh, or about the name thing, about him saying his name. Let's go. So Kiwana, I'm gonna say on what I gotta say about Kiwana first, and then move on to the calls. So Kiwana wants to control. Okay, about the name. Yeah, that's what I think. I think he think it's some kind of slick way. He's um he's trying to be incognito or something. I think that's what that's about. So Kiwana wants to control how the content is being rolled out. You can tell by what she's saying that she doesn't agree with these calls coming out. She's saying that she has an issue because of the children being able to have access to these calls and hear this stuff and the impact that it can have on them. She was expressed having the issue that some of the content creators rolled this stuff out on Mother's Day, and that's the time they didn't even have enough respect to give the kids time to try to work through and reconcile their feelings in this entire situation. And so she um is like really like doing her typical bashing of the content creators who are reporting on the situation and putting out the information. And what I find ironic about her doing that, so let me say this first before I say what I find ironic. So she um she talks about information in the calls while she's trying to express this opinion. And I'm sitting and thinking to myself, while she's doing this, like, isn't this ironic? Because in order for you to be able to make that assessment and to be able to criticize the content creators for how they rolling out the content, that means that you listened, you watched, you listened to the calls, right? And she had some input to how she felt that the content creators were responding to some of the scenarios. And in some of the situations, I do agree with her, right? Like when it comes to those women that clearly have some mental challenges, I don't think that it's no fun to be made in that, because it is showing clearly how manipulative, deceitful, disgusting this man was, right? So I haven't watched a whole bunch of content creators talk about the cause. I have watched two. I have watched Shanitra speak, and then I've listened to the cause on Anna B, and then I think I might have listened to one little thing that Shank Rock did, because it was one little thing where Shank Rock talked about after listening to the cause, he felt like Shannon was just delusional and in love with this man and was believing what he was saying. And he changed his position on thinking Shannon had something to do with the actual events that led to Nazia's death. And I want to say this. I think that, to me, I think one of the important things, you said you didn't hear her say she hasn't listened before. I turned it off. Um, I didn't hear her say she hasn't listened before I turned it off. She has listened. You said he really talks about the kids on the calls. I understand her feelings, but I don't know about the exactly, like I can understand her feeling that way, but there is something. And what I think that probably, see, I think Janelle has a better a head when it comes to this. Like, she knows how to just disassociate herself as a family member to try to not, or maybe she might be listening, but she doesn't come forward to speak about it. But I feel like if she is trying to do something to not let herself get angry, she might be refraining from listening. I know it might be hard to try to keep the kids from listening. But I think that that's the role and the job of the people who have the care and custody of the kids, to try to do what they can to try to keep the kids from listening. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that they're going to be able to definitely make sure that the kids aren't listening, but to do what they can to keep the kids from listening. But I do think, because of the magnitude that this case, the type of media that it received on social media, I do think that it is important for all of the people that have consumed this content to hear these calls, because some of the things that the people went after some of these individuals about, um not that anybody is going to change their opinion about whether or not they still think that Shannon has some level of responsibility, but I do think that these calls help to remove some of what people were saying. Like, people that made the accusations that Shannon and that was somehow involved in the actual events of the unaliving of Naziah. Like, the calls help you to see they weren't involved in that part, right? And for those people who want to still like hold on to that, they not going to change their mind regardless. They gonna hold on to that either because they don't want to be wrong, or somehow they feeding into some type of conspiracy behind the whole thing or whatever. But I think it's clear through these calls that even though we can fault Shannon and Annette for a lot of missteps and how they handle him being his access to the kids, the fact that Shannon even had any kids with him in the first place, knowing about his background, like all of these things, we can look at those things and say, okay, that is part of a character judgment on them. But they were being accused of actually having something to do with Naziah's unaliving. And I think that these recordings help to dismantle that. So that's one thing that comes out of it. I think that in the kids hearing that, I don't think the kids should be listening to none of this content. But if the kids are listening to the content, I think that, like I said, it is a responsibility of the people who have the care of the kids to try to keep them from hearing it. But if they know that they hear it, I think they need to have conversations with them that put things in proper context. You understand, Phil, but hold on, let me see, just be. You said Kiwana doesn't like Shannon. She doesn't want her name cleared. Well, okay, Just V. I think that, okay, so from her live last night, I think that, yeah, we have had that impression. Let me just say that. We have had the impression that Kiwana doesn't like Shannon. But based on the live last night, I don't it to me, I felt like she was trying to use that. I don't know how to put it. I guess you gotta kind of hear the live. It the way the way that she did the live last night, and the way she was speaking about the situation, it was as if she was trying to backtrack some of which she had put out here, in my opinion. And that's why I'm saying that. That's why I wanted to talk about it, because it's kind of like she wanted to backtrack some of her own opinion that she put out here, some of her own narratives that she put out about Shannon. And maybe that is because she did listen to some of the calls now, and now she got to change her heart and feels like, okay, we thought she had something to do with the actual murder. We find out from these calls she does it, right? And so now she's taking this offensive position, right? When it comes to Shannon, when it comes to the other women. Like I said, I can see her point when it comes to the women that deal with these mental challenges, right? But when I look at a woman like Kizzy, I don't have that feeling that people probably should not be as cynical or not use humor in order to discuss this situation when it's surrounding Kizzy. Because some of these women, and it speaks to what we talked about yesterday about the system of patriarchy. The system of patriarchy, these are the kind of women like a Kizzy, like all of these women that sat there and had thought that their conversations with Jarvis about him cheating on them was more important than a missing child. The fact that more than likely, if the child was missing, that means he did something to her. What did he do to her else outside of her missing that was also inappropriate that led to him having to create a situation for her to be missing? There was no focus by any of these women on that. And this is the issue within communities of, like I say, not this is not just amongst people of color. This is happening in various ways, but women in general are allowing this type of thing to occur. And so I don't have any um I don't feel any kind of way about how the narrative is being presented when it comes to a woman like Kizzy. Kizzy has no problem with the fact that she's dealing with this man who she says herself she's seen all of these charges or all of these cases that he got where he's violating children, minors. She got no problem. She's mad at law enforcement trying to investigate a situation with a young child missing. She's more mad at law enforcement than she is at the person that she's involved with. And this type of system is what keeps this type of cycle going. And so a lot of times, in order to shine a light on the situation, these type of things is what will shine a light on it. Like I posted the other day the jail visit with Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland shooter, the Parkland high school shooter, right? You don't see this is what I get in our community, right? You don't see a lot, no, you don't see Caucasians saying, oh, don't put that, don't show that. Don't put that on there. That's not appropriate, right? Because all of these things that are made available to the public are made available to the public for a reason, for awareness. Some people might not even know that this kind of thing is going on if it was not for them finding something on the net, discussing and talking about it and bringing visibility to it, right? And so it's getting to know the mindset of a person that would go into a high school and shoot up a high school, a kid that would do that. But the same thing, like when I talked about the 764 cult and the father that came on and talked about his daughter unaliving herself at the hands of that extremist group. And he did that to bring awareness and allow other parents to see, like, these are the things you need to be checking when it comes to your children, right? Um, you said also white people don't think the worst of them represent exactly. And that's my point. That's my point. Just V, you said it. Listen, you are preaching this morning. Like they are not like when I'm watching true crime and I'm paying attention to what's happening in the true crime community when I'm dealing with crimes that Caucasians commit, right? You overwhelmingly see the people holding them into account. You don't see a large presence of people who are trying to exonerate people who they know more than likely committed the crime. You don't. You might see some of those in people be somewhat sympathizers by looking at the lifestyle of the individual, bringing the spotlight to the lifestyle and asking for some type of leniency when it comes to sentencing and things. You might see that type of advocacy going on. But when you are looking at in the true crime community amongst Caucasians, you are not seeing them trying to, number one, police how the information is coming out, what is being exposed and what is being told, because in the reality all of that is educational to someone. It is education to someone in order to try to, is a preventative and a cautionary measure to try to see, okay, if I identify and see this type of thing, this might be something I might be concerned about, especially somebody who knows absolutely nothing about a particular behavior pattern, right? So I don't, you said the only people I ever see white people say to free is Britney Spears and that lady who might have ran her boyfriend over in different shows. Right. Like you even still see white people wanting Casey Anthony in jail. Like they are pissed about that. These white people are pissed that Casey Anthony is still out and was exonerated. These white people are pissed that John Benet Ramsey's parents are not in jail. Right? Like you don't see an overwhelming presence of them trying to protect people who they know are the criminal element in their community. Not out here, like, as far as when you know that the person has done the crime. They don't care nothing about how the system decided to charge them and indict them in order to get them for the crime. They just want them to be responsible for the crime. That's the kind of presence you feel out here when you're dealing with crimes that are committed by Caucasian people. It's overwhelming. I talked about that Lindsay White, is it Whitehead or Whitestone? I can't remember. Case, where she, I'm trying to, was it Arkansas? I'm trying to think, was she in Arkansas? But I posted it on my page and I did a live about it. A white woman, white Christian woman, and in a white Christian town, right? And she was molesting a girl. She was a basketball coach at the school. She was a youth leader at her church, her family church. And she had connections to the community, strong connections to the community. So much so that when she took her guilty plea, she was confident because she had over 30 letters from educators in her community to vouch for her and her credibility and her character, right? And she presented it to the judge. The judge was someone who had ties to her family, who was affluent in the community, and the judge sentenced her to probation. And guess what? The district attorney was not okay with that. There were other people in the community who were not okay with that. You want to know what they did? They took their kids out of the school and refused to send their kids to school because they were like, we're not sending our kids to no school. Hey, good morning, Queen Keish. Um, we're not sending our kids to no school with people who would write a letter for a pedophile. That was the first thing that the community members did and organized. And then, so they, as a result of that, it forced some of the people who wrote letters for her to retract their statements, right? And when they retract their statement, um, when they retract the statements, they went before the judge. The district attorney tried to get her sentencing rescheduled and reconsidered and brought back before the judge because some of the individuals who wrote these letters on her behalf said that she was deceptive in telling them what they were writing the letter for, what her crime was, what she was pleading guilty to. Right now, I don't know whether I believe that, but that's what them white people told them people because they did not want to deal with the level of scrutiny that that community was putting on them. And so they were not successful. The judge would not reconsider the sentencing. And so you want to know what that district attorney did? That district attorney forwarded that case to the feds. And because they found out that Lindsay had taken that girl across state lines, I think it was Arkansas, Georgia, and Nevada. Arkansas, Georgia, and another state. I gotta go back and look at all of the details. I be looking at so much shit I can't remember. But it was she had crossed the lines of 3 states with that girl. They charged her on a federal charge of trafficking, sex trafficking. And she has a federal charge. And right now, she is sitting in a jail cell because she did things to violate the terms of her parole from the state charge and not submitting the proper address. The community members kept up on that. They reported it. They got the bail revoked, the bond revoked. Like this is all of the organization they did in order to deal with this situation. So I just like I when it comes to I understand, like I said, the idea of um I understand the idea of Janelle and Kiwana maybe feeling some type of way about the information coming out, being concerned that the kids are hearing the information. I think at this point, the emphasis can only be placed on trying to make sure that the kids are getting the proper uh, um, services and I'm sure that the individuals who have custody and care of the kids that they are doing that. I'm sure at this point, because of the magnitude of this case, that social services is following through with that because they might be in a situation where they might be looking at some backlash from this situation on the behalf of some of the victims in this case. I don't know how liable the state might end up being as a result of it. And so I'm pretty sure that they are trying to follow and make sure that these kids are getting the proper services and the proper care. But I think that it does need to be some light we need to shine a light on some of what happened. Number one, because you never know how this can connect people in order for them to be able to get the proper services necessary for them. Like these 2 mentally challenged girls on the call, the kids are getting the proper services and stuff that they need, right? But these 2 mentally challenged girls that are on these calls with Jarvis, is it somebody that is reaching out to them and trying to get some services for them to keep this level of manipulation from happening again? Is it some kind of family member that is watching this? They need to get because I'm really concerned that maybe the 2 of them women need some type of guardianship over them or something to try to safeguard them from getting into some type of shit like this again. Because the girl Kayla just be, did you okay? So let's switch lanes now. The girl Kayla, so it's 2 mentally challenged women on the calls with Jarvis. You got Nay and you got the girl Kayla. Now, after listening to the calls again last night in full, because I went back to listen to the whole thing of Shanitra Speaks. So after I listened to that, I think that the girl Kayla Just is the $68 one. She sounds like She was the one from the first batch of calls from behind the wall with A and B, that she was the one with the $68. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because did you hear her on that call when she said she is so tired? She is working so hard trying to make sure that she can take care of them. Cause she was like, I'm working so hard, I don't get no rest trying to make sure I can take care of us. I think she is the one. You said, girl, no, that is not happening. They're the kind of slow that don't recognize that they are delayed. Right, but a family member really needs to like hear this, because I am a family member of them girls need to hear this and find and do some type of get some type of assessment to see if these girls need to be in somebody's care, like if somebody need to oversee them, because it was a whole lot revealed in them calls. Jarvis revealed that there were other men that was easily taking advantage of them. That's how he came into them, like he came towards them like he was a savior, like he was saving them from all of the other men that was taking advantage of them. So my concern is that, okay, Jarvis is gone. Jarvis is out of their life. He can't get nothing from them no more. But what if they was doing all of this for Jarvis with other men, and they are on the call basically like admitting to, yes, I only did that because you this and this and this. There is a level of vulnerability. And I want to share something, and the reason why I'm saying this, right? You say, the reason I'm saying that they might need somebody is because to oversee them is because I was helping a mom out one time with her child who was dealing with some mental health challenges, right? And she has a medical condition that causes some situations to occur, and it impacts the right frontal lobe of her brain, and as a result, that's the center for behavior. And so she has like a lot of issues. Well, the doctors at the mental health facility, they were explaining to us that because of her situation and her condition, that this makes her, they were basically trying to say that she needs 24-hour care, right? And they were saying that there are lots of reasons why she needs 24-hour care. So they were making a recommendation that she be placed into a facility, right? And they were saying the reason that she needed 24-hour care is because it is dangerous to leave her out to the public for multiple reasons. But a lot of times when women dealing with that type of situation, they have a high sex drive, because her situation is connected to a mental health issue, and that mental health issue makes her crave any kind of attention, right? And with that, it doesn't matter whether it's negative or positive attention, right? And so as a result, it's like they seek out the attention of men, and it's easy for them to be vulnerable to somebody doing something to them. And so the recommendation was because the medical providers were basically saying that it was no way that the mother could have the capacity to care for this child 24/7 the way that she needs supervision. And because the mother has other kids, they explain how her being in the house could have a negative effect on the other kids, that her being in the house could what you say, you said they're the type that are capable of living alone and caring for a kid, but their elevator can't leave the first floor. I don't. That's what I'm saying. Some of what I was hearing on that call Just be, I'm concerned of whether or they are capable of living alone. Because part of living alone is not making yourself, like this man could have been a murderer that could have killed them. I mean, he is a murderer. What am I saying? He is a murderer. He could have came in there, slashed the throat, and took all of their money, whatever little bit they had from their little check they get. You know, this the one girl talking about she working. She is working to send her money to this man. That's part of being vulnerable. I don't know. Maybe they can live on their own. Maybe they need somebody to live in with them. Maybe they need a live in. I'm not saying that the situation is so severe that they need to go into a facility. But because of some of the stuff I heard them girls saying on that call, I am concerned that they need somebody to be of more assistance because they are making themselves vulnerable to disease. And their mental capacity is effed up. Like I'm a woman that has all their mental faculties. You don't want them to be making themselves vulnerable like that to that type of thing, right? But these people are dealing with mental health challenges, and they are making themselves vulnerable to disease. They are making themselves vulnerable to exploitation, for them to be scammed out of everything. Like, they need some oversight. The what I was hearing on that phone, just be, they need some oversight, some kind of way. I don't know whether they need a live in, whether they need to live in somewhere, but something needs to happen. Something needs to happen. This is not okay. This is not. We say, let me see. You said, I'm not going to assume that she has family that is bright enough to recognize her deficiencies. They may think she's stupid. Yeah, and that's right. That's another thing. They may think that she's stupid or not smart, but don't understand that there is a reason. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It might be because, like, with the situation that I'm talking about, um, you said their speech tells me that they are likely a exactly. And the with the person I'm talking about, she has a rare condition, right? And so it is something that could have actually gone unnoticed for the majority of her life if the proper attention wasn't given to that individual, right? So you're right. Like, these people might have family members that it's so many families that are in denial about mental health, or developmental delays, right? Making sure that when they see something happening, that they are talking to the doctor and they are getting the right imaging to make sure that nothing is going on that is creating a mental health situation. Because all mental health situations are not just based on traumatic experiences or hormonal imbalances. Some of them are coming from the fact that there might be a tumor somewhere, there might be tubers somewhere in the brain. There might be um, something with the functioning of the brain. There might be some real underlying medical issue that's causing a mental health problem. And sometimes if people are on top of the care when these people are children, that's how it go overlooked for so long. And then you're when these people become adults, you're counting on that adult that is dealing with that challenge to try to get the proper care to find out what's going on with them. And a lot of times that is not what's happening. And so often, this is why you keep seeing these people, they in prison. That prison is what holds them, because they look at them as a menace, and not that they needed some medical attention early on to try to intervene in this situation to have kept it from escalating to something like this. But in this type of situation, I know that there are situations where women could be dealing with some type of mental health challenge, whether it's brought on by a medical situation or something else. And this makes them vulnerable and be attention seekers. They become attention seekers. They don't care what kind of attention they get. And then they start making themselves, because they don't, They don't think anybody wants them. Like, you are hearing both of these women on the call asking this man, why do you want me out of all the women? I'm not beautiful. I'm fat. I'm ugly. I'm this, I'm that. Kayla, when she goes to ask Jarvis, because I think she thought she heard him say that he thinks she's beautiful. So she asked him a question to say, did you say I'm beautiful? And he didn't even say, yes, I think you're beautiful, right? Like, to try to go along and make her feel a little bit better. He was like, I said I really care about you. Right? Like, this is so disgusting. Listening to him talk to these women. And in some kind of way, I don't know, it need to be some type of intervention service, outreach, something to these two women to try to see what services they might need, because this, I don't, after listening to them on them calls, I don't feel comfortable with them just being out in the world, not being assessed to see if they need some more assistance so that this type of thing don't happen again. Like, this is ridiculous. And I know that um when when they are listening to the calls, they are monitoring it because they are looking for if there's anything criminal happening on it. But in some kind of way, I think this is criminal. This is criminal. And this is a victim. These women, these two mentally challenged women are victims of this man. A lot of these women are victims of this man, right? But definitely, these two individuals are part of a vulnerable population. And there needs to be some kind of intervention to try to see, do you have the proper family support that can help facilitate you getting some type of evaluation to see if maybe you need to have somebody needs to have some type of guardianship, or somebody, or you need more assistance with day-to-day tasks, something, because this is ridiculous. You said, I've heard a few R. Kelly supporters that sound related too, but I guess they don't have anything to do with this. Shut up. Yeah, I mean, it's this is terrible. I mean, the way that girl was crying about how hard she got to work, she's so tired all the time because she need to take care of them. Talking about, I guess, her and Jarvis. Like, I'm like, this. She sound like somebody working in a sweatshop. Like, it is a clear, like, I am concerned about who else. When Jarvis starts to gaslight her, because she's asking him questions that he don't want to answer, so he starts to gaslight her and switch and flip the switch and switch it back on her. She then is stumbling and trying to and she's trying to explain why she sought the attention of the other men. She talked about, she was asking him questions about, I did that because you always tried to keep me a secret. You didn't want your family to know nothing about me. Now, this is the thing. We know the reason why he was keeping you. Well, it was probably a few reasons. A few reasons. But one of the reasons he's keeping you a secret is because he's basically keeping all of them secret. You ain't the only one, baby. You ain't the only one he keeping secret. He's keeping everyone secret. He's even keeping some of his kids secret. So if she was able to be aware of that, to know that, right? Then maybe that wouldn't have make her feel like she's responsible for why he's trying to keep her secret, why he doesn't want their relationship to be public. But she is connecting the fact of him not wanting to be public with her because of he's ashamed of her. He's ashamed of being public with her. And that could very well be true too. I ain't saying that ain't the truth. But what we know is true is that he was keeping a lot of them secret because of all of the shit he had going on. So she talked about on the call, I guess that's why she got into these other situations with these other people, because she was she was depressed about him not wanting to be public with her, about him not wanting to introduce her to his family, not wanting her to meet his kids, stuff like that. And so that is why she made herself available to these other men, that she didn't feel desirable. You said, I keep wondering how he had the time, but he probably hadn't even done enough with her that would convince a fully functional woman that they are exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like when he's talking to Nay on the phone, right? And he is like, I mean, yelling at her, why are you talking to me in the bathroom? Why are you in the bathroom talking to me? He's trying to insinuate and gaslight her like she's in the bathroom talking to him because she has a man there. So that she didn't went into the bathroom to go talk to him. And so she was like, I'm in the bathroom because I told you I'm sick. And she basically said she was vomiting. And I think that there is a call or some kind of communication that we are missing between him and Nay in that conversation, because then she says, I don't want to talk about this no more. I don't want to talk about this no more. And she's talking about how this is making her sick. So I'm like, okay, is she in the bathroom sick because of something he's saying to her? Like that, Nay is the other mentally challenged one. And so she I this is these calls exposing that part. Like I said, we already know he was already a predator of another vulnerable population, which is children. But then for him to be exploiting a mentally ill the way that he is, the fact that those people out there need some intervention and services, for him to be exploiting a woman with health issues, uh, the way that he was, like this is insane. Let me see. Just V. Yeah, you said I keep wondering how he had the time. Um, you said because one of the slow ladies said in one of the earlier calls that he wasn't giving her attention. Exactly. And so that's why she said that she made herself available. And like I said, my thing is that when these women are dealing with mental challenges, and when they are making themselves available to people like a Jarvis Butts, they are making themselves vulnerable to all types of exploitation. And I am concerned that they need some type of, like I said, I don't know whether they need a live-in, somebody just to check in with them from time to time, a counselor or something, whether they need to live in a facility. But it is something about these calls that is so disturbing with the way he's speaking with these two women that make me think that they need some other kind of services to assist them with day-to-day life, because this is, it is sad to see women who deal with this type of situation make themselves available, and then they end up in a worse situation that leaves them poverty stricken and all types of other things, because they are dealing with a mental health challenge and they cannot function daily on their own with basic tasks. Yeah, they can shower. Yeah, they can put some clothes on. You know, yeah, they can do, like you said, Justine, they're probably good with kids. You know, with those two women, I didn't hear a presence of kids with either one of them in their house. And Kayla, I don't think has any kids at all, because she put emphasis on her um trying to take care of her and Jarvis. She didn't mention anything about a child. but I'm pretty sure that they are probably great with kids, and they have a lot of whole other great qualities. But when it comes to certain things, in order to try to make sure that they are being protected from certain things, they need some kind of service in place, because those calls and their um that conversation in them calls, there is something severely going on. I don't know what it is. You said I haven't gotten to the part of the calls yet. So that is on the calls where Shanitra speaks. I think it's on, if you go into Shanitra speaks and you go to the live um that she did on Jarvis Butts, that is where the calls are in. And in the beginning, I think it's Kizzy talk. It's a couple of calls with Kizzy, I think, in the beginning of that, um in the beginning of that live. And then the next set, I think it's one call with Shannon, and then you're gonna get the Kayla calls. I think that's the order that it went in. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I think that's the order it went in. So if you kind of want to just skip through to see, because those Kizzy calls that she played, I don't think, to me, it wasn't anything I think was contributing to the conversation. I think it just showed more of Kizzy's character, that she really don't give a damn. Like, she's on them calls, Kizzy is cussing at her own kids, and telling the child to shut the refrigerator, you fat ass. I told you I'ma feed your greedy fat ass, and all that. Like, that's the type of stuff you hearing from Kizzy. And then I think Kizzy was talking to Jarvis about getting ready to get into a fight with her niece or something like that. But and then the call from Shannon is the same calls that we heard on Anna B's channel. So the new thing in that batch is the Kayla calls. And I fell off to sleep towards the end. So I don't know. I thought I heard Nay might have been on that one too, but I'm not altogether sure. Yeah. Yeah, to her kids. Telling them close the damn refrigerator, you fat ass. It was like, I told you I'ma feed you, greedy fat ass. Kizzy don't care. She don't. That's what I'm saying. When it comes to that kind of woman, the fact that um the content creators make fun of the conversations and the situations between them, I don't see nothing wrong with that, because it needs to be some exposure that, yes, there were some women. Jarvis is gone, but there are some women who, while this child was missing, were aware that this child was missing. Law enforcement told them that they were certain that Jarvis had something to do with her being missing. They came to their houses, took stuff out of their houses, all types of shit. And these women still was going along. It's the call. What about just the call with Tashi? And I think her real whole name is Tashiana, because I heard Jarvis say that on one of the calls. I think it said Tashiana or something like that. But so he was on the call with Tashi. Do you remember that one with Tashi and she's in the hospital? This is after they went and took her car and stuff. She is she's another one who was not really concerned about the fact that Nazaria was missing. Um, Not in them calls to me. She was concerned that Jarvis was lying to her. She was mad that Jarvis lied to her about the cell phone. And then she said, because when he tried to make light of lying to her about the cell phone, because remember, in her testimony, she says that the cell phone, that he told her that he had left the cell phone at home, right? But the cell phone was in her car. And remember, when he tried to get that call to King to say to get the cell phone out of her car, and when the law enforcement heard that, that's how they knew, and that's what made them go get her car. And so when she's talking on the phone to Jarvis, and she's in the hospital, you can hear all the machines beeping in the back and stuff, and people coming in and out. And she says to him, she said they went and got my car, and when they went in my car and they came back with this phone, and I was like, that's Jay's phone. And she was like pissed and mad at him, talking about, you lied to me about something stupid. You didn't even need to lie to me about where your phone was at. And so then he's making light of the fact that it's just a phone. I forgot. I didn't realize that I had left it inside of my jacket pocket, or whatever it was that he said that he left it. And so, um, the inside of the car. And so she said, well, it's a big deal because now that phone that you left in my car got me caught up in some shit. So while he was trying to make light of leaving the phone in her car, now she's saying, well, now it got me caught up in some shit. So as the conversation progresses, she is getting more and more infuriated with Shannon. And she's feeling like Shannon then told the police that Jarvis has something to do with Naziah disappearance, because she wants him to be in jail for a longer time. And so Tashi is saying, I don't care if this continues and this keep going on, and I don't get my stuff back. I'm going over there to talk to Shannon. I'm going to her house. I'm going over there to talk to her. It's going to be a problem. So, and Jarvis is allowing and going along with the idea that Shannon is somehow trying to put this on him as a punishment for him, I guess, moving on with her. Like, this is what is on the mind of these women while this child is missing, and the police have taken your things in connection to her missing. So while they on the stand and they are saying certain things and testifying in a certain way to try to make it look like they're being cooperative with the authorities, these calls show how they did not want to cooperate at all. You got one baby mama who is being told to clean the car. Like, what type of sane thinking individual who is told that a child is missing, and this man is trying to tell you he don't got nothing to do with the child missing, but he's telling you to go clean the car? Like, what is not making you connect something that something is wrong? Now, maybe later on down the line in these calls, maybe we're going to see that there was some level of cooperation from these women. But as of right now, what we are seeing as these calls are going into April is that some of these women, they were very hesitant and reluctant to cooperate in an investigation of a missing child with a man who they are involved with. And that's important because this shows you exactly how there are some women who are willing to cooperate, and to cover for these men who commit these crimes, and they try to do what they can to cover up for them. And sometimes it's successful. Sometimes the cover up is successful to the point where you don't know what happened. Let me see, just V. Hold on. Let me see. You said I saw a Dateline of 2020 with a delayed woman. She lived alone, and I was able to work as a and she lived alone and was able to work as a babysitter. But some guy lured her. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And look at what Jarvis does to Naziah. So you don't think he was capable of possibly doing that to one of them? You say, okay, I only saw her upload. I listened sometime today. Let's see. Um Let me see. You said I'm trying to give them a little grace because they really seem to not know and believe that he was responsible. Listen, I'm gonna tell you something, Just V. I I try to give them a little grace for that reason too. But at the same time, if the police busted up into my house, there is certain pieces of evidence that the detective shared with these women. This is the thing. These women disclose the information. This is what I find odd, Just V. These women on the calls disclose the information that the detective told them, right? When it came to each other. But Shannon discloses that the detective showed her the text messages that Jarvis was having with Naziah, her and her mother. Just V, you don't think that them detectives showed them women that too? You don't think that the detective showed them women them communications that girl was having with that man? Did none of them mention it? Did none of them mention being shown the communications between him and Naziah? You want to know why I think they didn't mention it? Because they didn't want to face the fact that he was doing that to a child. I believe that detective, she was giving them women everything. Tashi was Tashi said that the detective told her about the previous charges that he had. The detective told her, basically made her look like she was a bad mom for allowing her children to be around him. You don't think that detective showed them messages that he was having with Naziah? To try to get them to talk, to say how serious this is. Like, look, we're not just coming in here and we're not just taking your things just because. There is evidence, there is a trail, there is some things here that is showing that he was involved with this little girl. If we know that um in February and somewhere between February and April, that Shannon saw those messages, somewhere in between that, right? Somewhere in between after that press conference, and then, well, we know Shannon saw some messages before that on her own. But we know that somewhere between that press conference in April, that Shannon, the detectives presented messages to Shannon. I believe the detectives did the same thing with those women, especially when you're talking about Tashi and Leticia, whatever. Because they took their vehicles and they found a cell phone in Tashi's vehicle. They have possibly Letitia's vehicle being the vehicle used the day that the crime was committed, which is why she was probably told to clean the car. So I I have to believe that detective, she was telling all of them. I have to believe that she shared something with those women to confirm that there was a relationship going on between him and her. Now, I know the thing. This is the thing. I know the thing. Wait a minute. You said, hold on. You said, but we've been knowing our sector has shown us that not all women care about. Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. And this just shows us even more like how many of them are. This is not rare. Just V. That's what I'm saying. This is not rare. The fact that most of the majority of these women, I'm trying to think of one woman out of all of these calls, Just V, that we have heard so far that was concerned about the fact that this child was missing. I don't think we heard not one of them. I haven't. Not the calls I heard. I have not heard one call so far, one conversation so far. Out of all of these women we are naming, it's a bunch of them. I haven't heard not one of them have concern that this child is missing. Have some suspicion, question why are they coming after you so hard about this child missing? Somehow in their mind, they have made an excuse and a justification for why this man is being wrongfully accused of this, despite the fact that he has a background that substantiates that he's done this before. They are acknowledging that they are hearing everything on Facebook, on YouTube, all across social media, and they are discarding all of the shit that they are hearing. And by the time April comes, like I said, even Angel, who was pissed about them coming into her house, is having regular conversation with this nigga. I I think this shows us that this type of situation is more prevalent than we thought, right? Because some people try to say that it's just this is a I always whenever you look at a small group, it is only a small representation of the larger population. There are lots of women. A small group can show that there are lots of women who are okay with this type of shit and that they overlook. So when people look at the fact that Shannon and Nat overlook this going on in their house, when you listen to these women in their conversation, you get to see how many more women would have possibly overlooked this happening in their house. We are with Kizzy, we are witnessing how she's talking to her kids while she's softly talking on the phone to Jarvis, somebody who had her have to take a Uber down to go be questioned by detectives about a missing child. She's talking softly to him while scolding her kids on the phone about wanting to eat. Like, and I ain't saying that the kids they might have just ate. I don't know. She might have just gave them something or whatever. I don't know. But what I'm saying is that look at her tone when she's talking to him changes from one thing to then when the kids now she's get out of there. I'ma feed you, your fat greedy ass. Get your fat ass out my refrigerator. Like this is insane. I cannot recall one woman on any of these calls that had any concern about this missing child. You said I'm not sure if they showed the other women. You said I'm not sure if they showed the other women. I think they were lighting fires by letting the women know about each other while not sharing too much. They might not have shown all of them, but I think that there has to be something that they showed those two women, is what I'm saying. At least. Like even if they held off showing Angel, because when they had the search warrant to go in Angel house, I think that was primarily because um he lived there and they thought that maybe there was something there from when he committed the crime. But I don't think that they thought that it was possible that Angel may have had some type of something or some more information about the crime. I don't think they thought that she had any kind of information. But when by the time when they got to Latricia and Tashi, I think it's possible that they might have wondered if they knew something because of that phone being in her car and him telling King to go get it. That means that then King got to get access to the car. So it's some kind of way did he send a bat signal to Tashi that phone need to get up out of that car? Like, and so if so, does she know something about the actual events of Naziah missing, right? And then with Latricia, he's telling her to clean the car. So clearly, like, they might have been suspecting. Do they know something about her missing? Are they somehow aware of her missing? And so I don't know. I would think, like I said, that detective was sharing a whole lot. And you're right. Maybe she was only telling them about each other. I don't know. But she was telling them about his other charges that he had, about his previous charges, about what he had done to children. So a reasonable person would know that if she's alluding to that, then and the detective is making us aware that he has this issue and now this child is missing, a reasonable person is going to leave there and say they think he got something to do with this child. And why? That means that it's something inappropriate that happened with the child. Now, I'm going to tell you the thing that I think could have thrown some of the women off, okay? Because of the fact of him being incarcerated. They were not following the timeline properly, right? We know Angie always getting us about them timelines, okay? They were not following the timeline properly, right? You said, yeah, they heard everything from Facebook to podcast. They knew what was being said. Exactly. And so one thing that might have thrown some of them off, and I was thinking, was because you keep hearing them say, well, he's locked up, he's incarcerated, how does he have her? Because what I think they were assuming is that the child was still alive. So why would they be investigating him for kidnapping the child and keeping the child, and he's incarcerated? How was he going to kidnap her and keep her somewhere? I think in their mind, that's one way to look at why they might have been somewhat confused about what was going on, because they might have been assuming that, okay, they think somebody kidnapped her and have her somewhere. Well, how is he kidnapping and having her somewhere if he's incarcerated? I don't think that they were considering the fact that he killed this, that the allegation was that he killed this child or whoever killed this child. And so they're just thinking like somebody then kidnapped and keeping captive the child. And so that could have been one thing that was throwing them off. Um, the other, but the other thing is, remember when he unalived Naziah? He unalived her the day before he was supposed to turn himself in. I think that messed up Jarvis's timeline, right? Because I think that's exactly, he was setting it up so it would look exactly like that, right? He did it the day before he was supposed to go turn himself in on that gun charge, so that when everything hit the fan, it could be said like, well, I had to turn myself into jail the next day. So people wouldn't be suspicious, or I think that's why it was that timing. That's why he chose to do it that day, was because it would give ambiguity and have the people around him doubt his involvement. Like, I had to go turn myself into jail the next day. When I got time to be taking the child or killing the child, that when he went in to go turn himself in that day after, and they decided not to take him into custody that day, that fucked up Jarvis' whole plan. That's my opinion. That messed up his whole plan, because he thought that he would be able to use the excuse of his incarceration to throw them off of the trail. But that didn't work, because when he went to go turn himself in, when he went to go to turn himself in that next day, then he was given that additional month. And so it wasn't going to work for everyone, right? For those people who thought that she might have still been alive and that it would have been impossible for him to kidnap her or do something with her or put her somewhere or whatever because he was incarcerated, well, that took that part of it away. I think that whole thing was set up that way so that he can create some ambiguity about his involvement in her missing. But once that threw it off, it gave it gave some people, I'm not, because law enforcement probably wasn't ever fooled by it, but he probably was more so worried about throwing people off around the situation. So that because then if they don't think, if the people around the situation don't look at him or think of him as a suspect, then he's good. And you want to know what else, y'all? I wonder, because we are hearing these jail calls a month after her missing, but I wonder what were the verbal conversations between Shannon and Jarvis during that period when Naziah went missing to when he went into jail. And the reason I say that is because remember, Annette initially did not report Naziah missing to the police. She only went to the school resource officer. And I think they said it took her like 2 or 3 weeks to go report it to the actual police. And I'm interested to know how involved was he in that delay, if he was at all, of them going to the actual police to report versus because and that only went to the school resource officer. Remember when Roxy was on Mark D and said it took her, now I know Roxy be messing up her details, but this part was right because based on the timeline. She was saying that it took for other family members to start asking questions because when they heard that Naziah was missing and that this had been going on for a few weeks. And then when you think about the idea of when the press conference was held and all that, none of this stuff happened until Jarvis is in jail, until he goes to turn himself into custody around February the 9th. So I wonder what Jarvis was saying that was potentially delaying them from going to the actual police to report Naziah missing, and instead of just the school resource officer. Like I'm interested into knowing that, and the only person that can provide us with that type of detail and information is Shannon. Wait a minute, you said your update. Um, You said even Shannon said, how could he kidnap her and he was in jail? Man, exactly. That's what I'm saying. He knew because he knows the type of intelligence of the people that he's dealing with. So he knew that at least it would throw them off, that this is how he would be able to continue to fool them. Even if he wasn't fooling nobody else and other people found out what he did, he would be able to still manipulate them by saying, well, I'm in jail. How could I do anything? And we hear him on the calls keep trying to say that and emphasize that. We hear some of the women freely bring it up themselves because Angel says it too. Angel was like, how do y'all think he kidnapped a little girl? He's in jail. Like I said, because they're assuming that the little girl is still alive, that she wasn't. So they are thinking that in order for him to have her somewhere, he would have to be free to have her somewhere. Um, Jesse, you said yes, he may have planned it for that day. But I also wonder if it was a last minute decision after they didn't take him. Like maybe she'd still be alive if he went in. It No, because look, he didn't find out till he went to court the next day that they were not taking him into custody. So he didn't find out the day before. He didn't find out until the next day when he went to court that they weren't taking him into custody. Because I thought about that too initially. But then when they said that he went to court and when he appeared in court, that's when he found out he wasn't going, it was a delay and that he wasn't going into custody that day. That's when I was like, oh, well, then that kind of like gets rid of that theory because he didn't even know that he wasn't going to be going in the next day. He was counting on the fact that he was going to be going in the next day. Um, you said, I think it was a month later that they talked to Detroit police. Right. That's what I'm saying. That's why because when you hearing the timing of the press conference, that's what I said. I couldn't remember if it was like 2 to 3 weeks um, from when they reported it. But the press conference happens um, right around that time, or the 12th or 13th or whatever. And so you figured that's a whole month. So was he saying something to delay them from reporting it to the police? And then somebody said, now I haven't seen this yet, but I heard in Shanisha Speaks commentary. I don't know where she placed this, if she has it somewhere, but Shanisha Speaks is saying in her commentary that there were conversations that Shannon was having that was talking about Naziah missing, and talking about it in a derogatory way, talking about her being too fast, she too grown, all of this kind of thing. And so, like I said, I'm wondering if that was being encouraged by Jarvis in order that's what was keeping them from reporting it. If he was encouraging that type of thinking so that they would think, okay, this, and that's why when they did even when they did report her, they reported her as a runaway. They didn't report her. She wasn't initially entered, and that's why when she says it turned into homicide, missing person, that's why, because when they initially reported it, she was reported as a runaway. And it was because that was the narrative, like as if she had ran away to go be with some boy or something. And so, like I said, I'm wondering how much of that, I don't know where that conversation, I'm gonna have to go back again and listen to Shanisha Speaks to see if she says where that conversation is. But apparently there's some documented conversation where Shannon is speaking about Naziah missing in a derogatory way, basically making it look like that, yeah, she just ran off to go be with this boy. And I don't know who Shannon supposedly is having this conversation with. If I'm not mistaken, like I said, I was dozing off to sleep, y'all. If I'm not mistaken, I think she said that the conversation was with Jarvis. So I'm wondering how much he was telling them to hold off on reporting. And maybe he thought that he was going to be able to get them to hold off for a very long time, y'all, because you have to consider the history of the family. Like, look at the situation with Lady, Naziah's mother. She was a drug addict. They let her just go off, and didn't care and weren't worry about where she was. So had it not been for, like, I guess, other family members intervening and asking questions and saying, listen, something more needs to be done. Why haven't you filed a police report yet? We need to know where she is. It's possible that to this day, Naziah could have still been labeled as a missing child. I mean, look at this Celeste. Look at Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Naziah could have still been labeled as a runaway, and nothing would have been investigated or looked into if it wasn't for the intervention of the other family members, because they assumed that Naziah just ran away to be off with some boy or a man. I don't know who they thought, whether it was a boy or a man. And because of the family history, because of what her mother had done and was allowed to do, they would have probably written her off the same way they wrote her mother off and out of the situation. So it was a reason that Jarvis thought that he could kind of pull this off and get away with this and not get caught. Let's see. You said, remember they said she was seen at the gas station. That may have Jarvis planting those type of seeds. Right, right. He might, right. You said, but didn't he have court before and they let him go? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he was supposed to turn himself just be in a time before that. But I do know that they said that he did not find out he wasn't going into custody until the day that he went in. That he went to court prepared to turn himself in. And when he got there, that's when he found out. So that's why I'm saying I think that it was strategically planned for him to do it that day. before, because he knew that it would create that ambiguity with the people, the people around him, to say, listen, how could he have done this? Um, you said Shannon said that on Facebook or in the text, said she was probably with a boy. Okay, because I thought I heard Shanitra Speak say that she was having some kind of conversation with someone, and like I said, I thought that it's possible that Shanitra Speak said Jarvis, but I got to go back and listen to the conversation to confirm that, because I'm not altogether certain that it was Jarvis that she had the conversation with. But if I'm not mistaken, I thought that that's what I heard her say. But I'm gonna go back and check. But yeah, it's he I really think that Jarvis thought, because of the type of family he was dealing with, because of the history of the family, because he was able to influence them. I felt like he probably influenced. We don't know this for sure, but it's my opinion that he influenced them to delay reporting to the police. And then when they did report, they reported it as her as a runaway. That it is possible that it might have been a long time before anybody would have come to any realization that Naziah was murdered and not just ran away, if they ever found out at all. Like I said, because look at the dynamic with Lady. People would have just looked at it like, oh, she's off doing the same thing as her mother. She's just like her mother. She's doing exactly what her mother did. So he really had a reason to think that the way that he set this up, that he would possibly get away with it. Y'all, this is crazy. But I wanted to come on here and talk to you guys. I feel like I understand what Kiwana is trying to say, and it's a part of me that kind of like grapple with that too, like how this impacts the kids having to see or hear this conversation. I think that there's a way. Yes, I think that initially it probably is going to be a hard thing for them to hear and a negative, but I think that there is a way through proper therapy for this to somehow be used to help them to understand the type of manipulative person that their father was, and to overly emphasize that this is why this was not your fault, because some of the kids might be feeling like it's their fault, especially Janiyah, with the fact that her cousin is gone. Just like we talked about the Jonestown survivors having survivor guilt because they were able to make it out and the other people died. We don't know if Janiyah could be dealing with that, because he had her participating in all of this. And so she probably has some guilt about feeling about not coming forward and saying anything about it, not speaking up about it, having guilt that she was protecting her father over her cousin. The fact, and these messages down, even if they don't right now, down the line are gonna let her know how manipulative he was. That it was not just you. That you can't just blame yourself. Because this is how bad he was. This is how manipulative he was. And he didn't just fool you into this. He fooled a lot of people into this. You said, I'm sure Janiyah does. Yeah. Right. You said, it's also sad. You really have to count your blessings to be blessed. That's what I tell people all the time, Just be. Listen, I don't never take it for granted. And this is why people hear me say this often. I thank God that that I had a family that did what they could do to make sure that my childhood was the least traumatic as possible. Because, and that's why when I see certain things, like when I know you're gonna get me on this one, Just V, but when I see like a Krishan Rock, right? And I know the trauma that came through that family, it helps you to understand somebody's behavior. It's hard when you didn't grow up in a family, when you grew up in a family provided all of the things that you needed, provided you with all of the childhood experiences, did things to limit your trauma, was concerned about limiting your trauma, was concerned about not doing anything to contribute to your trauma, you do have an advantage in the world. You do have a different way of looking at the world. I don't know what I would be like if I had some of those experiences. And I think for any of us to think that we can really say what we would be like is not realistic. It is not realistic for us to try to predict what we would have done if we were a child placed in that type of environment. Because how we are raised determines how we respond to everything. And so this is why a lot of times when it comes to adolescents, young women, I have more patience because I know that I do come from a place where I had an advantage. I know I come from a place where I was privileged to not have to deal with none of those situations, to not have to try to figure out how to deal with those situations. When people keep trying to make it seem like that girls who are quote unquote fast or mature and so they can handle certain situations, that is trauma. That's not maturity. That is trauma. Because no young girl, no adolescent, no young boy, no child, period, should have to know what to do in these traumatic situations. Should know what to do when they are being placed in a situation that they shouldn't be in. They shouldn't instinctively know how to deal with an abuser. A child shouldn't even be put in a situation to deal with that. And so then after they are placed in that kind of situation, and then they are then labeled as being fast or too grown or whatever the situation may be, and then they're being assessed as being mature enough to know what it is they're doing, that is a trauma response. It's not maturity. That is a trauma response. It actually really shows a lack of maturation because they did not get to flourish in a healthy environment. So their response to that being placed into that negative situation is a survival of the fittest response. Only the strong survive. That is a space that a child should not be in. That a teenager should not be in. But too often they get assessed for them being mature. That gets translated into maturity for those people who want to okay what happens to them. And the only reason why they do that is because that's what makes them comfortable with being able to justify it, is by assigning maturity to the situation. So that makes it okay. No, that is trauma. That is something that child should have never even been placed in. A situation that they should never have even been able to figure out at that age. And so now it impacts how they see everything. Children shouldn't have to be made to figure out how they're going to eat every day. They shouldn't have to be trying to figure out how they are going to get pads and tampons. We see messages of Nazaria having to message Jarvis to go get her pads and tampons. Like, it should not the basic, when you place a child in a situation where they are not knowing where their most basic needs are going to come from, that's trauma. They have to have a response to it in order to meet those needs. Those needs might lead to them doing something that some people translate as being mature. That's not mature. That's traumatic. That is a traumatic response. That is something that they shouldn't even have been activated in them at that stage in their life. Wait a minute, let me see, Justin. You said I can't understand him doing that to his own daughter. I was thinking maybe if she did it to, she wouldn't tell. On right, right, right. You said, but then I realized that I was trying to put logic to right, and you want to know what? Just be a lot of times that is it. We try to apply our logic to a situation that we can't even identify with. And so that's why when we hear some of the stuff, it's like that doesn't make sense. That's why we can't follow the sequence of events, because when we try to apply our own logic, knowing what we are capable and not capable of doing, and that's even limited, but what we know that our uh uh ethical compass will allow us to venture into, right? We are trying to apply our own ethical compass and logic to a situation, and trying to follow the sequence of events. And this is why I think so many people lead to a thing of this don't make sense. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to somebody who has a moral compass is properly guiding them, to someone who is able to use logic and reasoning in order to know what is acceptable and what's not. But that is, you can't apply that same standard to someone who is participating in these type of things. So it's not supposed to make sense to you. You should probably be saying it's a good thing that it doesn't make sense to me, because that means that I've been oblivious to that this could even be a thing. And that's why I say a lot of times some people only get educated about these kinds of things by seeing it in the news, seeing the reports, by cases being transparent and people being able to access information. Because there are some people in the world who have never known no shit like this, that have to deal with no experience like this. And this is the thing, they are vulnerable. Those type of people are vulnerable. And they, a lot of times, that's how they end up, where they might end up in a bad situation, or somebody close to them end up in a bad situation, because they take for granted that these type of people don't exist in the world. My mother was talking to me because she been following this Nancy Guthrie thing, right? I kind of felt awful on it. I wish whoever got her mama, I wish they just returned her mama, right? But my mom was saying like she don't understand, like why wouldn't it be more surveillance at the house? Like that's what puzzled her so much. Like why wouldn't they have better surveillance? And I was like, "You, mommy, you want to know why they don't have better surveillance? Because that was their family home. They felt like they've been there all their life. When you listen to them talk, they talk about the safety of the neighborhood and how nothing ever happens there." And I was like, and what those people who think like that don't realize is that you have become the prime target for somebody, because they look for people who feel like they are too safe for something to happen. It is not just the fact of somebody impoverished that a predator will look for in order to try to manipulate. They look for the vulnerable also in the other direction, who have no clue that this type of shit even exists in the world. So they would be least suspecting that something is going to happen. So it's like you gotta. These are reasons why it's transparency to the public, because some people only get taught when they see these stories of other people on how, what they should be looking out for, how to be aware, how to properly manipulate their environment and keeping themselves safe. They only learn by watching the news and the stories of other people. And then that's how they learn how, oh, let me get this so I could try to make sure that at least if something happens, I do this, because I'm taking for granted that I think I'm okay. It's like me. I didn't want to use my location for a long time, right? But finally, I realized that I needed to let somebody have my location. So, and I watch a lot of true crime, but I was still opposed to like giving my location out because you just feel like, and people don't nobody need to know where I'm at every given second. If something happened, Apple can detect it, and they can go to Apple and figure it out, right? Or go to my phone carrier, and figure it out. But I was like, maybe with me giving my location, maybe they can react sooner, and that little bit of time might save my life, as opposed to it having to get to a point of having to go get some records from somewhere and go through all of that whole process. So it's a lot of things that people will take for granted until they see a particular thing. And then that will spark them to say, you want to know what? Let me make sure I do this. And then you hear a lot of stories where that is the case. They will say that something got their attention, made them put some type of safety precaution in place, and then something ended up happening to them, and that safety precaution is the thing that helped them out of it, right? And so this is like what I mean, life application, learning. What do you take from the experience? How is it that you are able to use this to not just help you in your everyday life, but you might be able to give awareness to others, to help others? These kinds of stories and situations and scenarios and access to this type of information helps us to be able to do some of that. I get there are some people who don't, I guess, need. They feel like they have everything within themselves to know what they need to do, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing. Just like Jesus said, if you are well, stay home. You don't need the need to know it. So why knock the people who this is how they learn? This is how they find out the information. But yeah, this is just, it's crazy. It's crazy. And I, like I said, that's why I always thank God. I always thank God for the family that he placed me in, because a lot of people take it for granted that people who they like, some of us who came from good families that did do the right things to try to limit our traumatic experiences, we take that for granted, and sometimes we use that to judge other people harshly. And it's like, you don't have, I don't know what I would have turned out to be if I wasn't born into the family I was born into. And so that's why the little things that they did that I might have gripes about, it's not even worth me complaining. Because when I look at so much of what other people had to, a lot of this, when I look at this, it increases my gratefulness. It increases it. Like, I don't know how it can get any more, but when I look at these kind of things, it increases my gratefulness, because it's one of those things that you can say, if it was not for the grace, so would I. I could have been in that same predicament. I could have been in that same kind of situation. You said, I feel like there should be enhancements for crimes against the elderly. Someone pushed a 76-year-old man down the steps to the subway in New York. It was unprovoked and he died. Yeah, I think I remember seeing something like that. Just V. Yeah, it's like, yeah, there should be. Definitely. Definitely. And that's what I mean. Like, even with Jarvis, with these women, there needs to be all kinds of enhancements when you do something to vulnerable populations. The elderly are a part of a vulnerable population. And maybe those things do exist. I don't know. But yeah, like, it's the elderly are a part of a vulnerable population. The mentally uh uh challenged individuals are a part of vulnerable, children are a part of any vulnerable population of individuals. I feel like the punishment should be harsher. And I always, and people, I do not believe in the death penalty. And when I say that, what I mean is that I would not feel comfortable sentencing somebody to death. I would not feel comfortable being the person that is responsible for taking somebody out of here, no matter what it is that they did. Like, I couldn't see my constitution bringing myself to doing that. But I feel like that if any people should get the death penalty, it should be someone who did something to a child. It should be someone who does someone to, like you said, somebody a part of a vulnerable population, the elderly, a person, the mentally disturbed and mentally ill. Like, those are the individuals, and that's why just V, I'm gonna start looking at the Nick Reiner situation, because I think that's a new case, a unique case for us to look at, because we are dealing with something in the reverse. We are looking at a severely mentally ill person who has committed a crime, and there is a history of the mental illness, severe mental illness. And so I'm interested to see that process, and I'm interested to see how people respond to that situation. Because what do we do when the mentally ill commit a crime, a heinous crime, right? Like, heinous. When you, I'm gonna tell you one case that had me pissed off, and still to this day got me pissed off. It is that case with Gypsy Rose Blanchard, when she killed her mother. Remember, that was the girl where her mother had Munchausen's and was saying that she had all of those illnesses and stuff, and they were scamming and scheming and getting money and stuff from everywhere. And yes, I know to a degree, Gypsy Rose was traumatized and groomed by her mother into that process, right? But what I thought was what I think is so disgusting about that case is that Gypsy Rose is on the streets free right now. And that the boy Nick, I can't remember his last name, but Nick, he is autistic, severely autistic. It is clear he really, really has some really bad problems. He is still sitting in jail for that crime. And like this situation with Nick Reiner, I feel like that there is something about with Nick that he needed to be assessed. And I don't know where they needed to put him. I don't know. And this is the thing. I know a lot of the things he did was very sadistic, but Gypsy was on that plane with him. And the fact, the thing is that I think I would be okay if she was still sitting in that jail with him, behind the crime. But I feel some type of way that she is out here on the street making reality TV, and getting, still putting herself in the spotlight, being controversial, doing all of this shit, and that boy is still sitting in jail. Like, it's something about that that just don't sit right with me with that situation. Let me see what she said. Hold on. Yeah, he's never getting out. Right. You said, hold on. You said it was said that someone who was in rehab with Nick said he was always complaining about how awful his parents were. Um, Gypsy co-defendant. Yeah, exactly. You said, "Yup, I feel the same way. That boy was different." And yes, I'm. The thing is that I don't know where they need to place him. Whether he needs to be in some type of facility or something to deal with his. I'm not necessarily saying to put him back out on the street, right? But the fact that he was punished so harshly, and then she was able to go after orchestrating the crime, because she was the orchestrator of the crime. He committed the crime, but she is the one who orchestrated the crime. He did it at her direction. And he did it based on what she was telling her that her mother was doing to her. And Gypsy knew she was manipulating him. She knew she was dealing with someone who had their mental faculties altered. And this is the thing. I understand what Gypsy mother did to her. I'm not, there are people who argue over that. There are people who argue over whether they feel like Gypsy's mother was as bad as Gypsy outlined. Um, all types of things. And some of that comes from because of certain allegations that they are saying that Gypsy made against other family members that were not true. But I think some of that is consistent with the behavior of her mother and the stuff her mother was doing. We clearly know that her mother initiated these scams. Gypsy was not, when her mother started doing this, Gypsy was a child. Yes, Gypsy participated in it with her even once she became an adult and was old enough to tell people how old she really was, and that some of that stuff wasn't really wrong with her and all of that other kind of stuff. I'm certain that she wasn't signing up to have all of her teeth taken out in order to run a scam. I do believe that Gypsy did experience some level of trauma. So I don't want to join the side in the group of people who say that the mother, like Gypsy was lying on the mother, or that, you know, the mother, like trying to make the mother less culpable for what she did do, right? But when it comes to that whole crime and what happened, I feel like I don't understand how she was able to. This is a situation where I don't agree with none of this verdict, none of this situation. I do not agree with the fact that she is now able to be home and have a family and do all of this shit, and that boy is still sitting in there. Like I said, I don't know what is the right thing to do with him, but I don't think that him sitting in jail for that crime and her being out free, I don't think that that to me that's bothersome. I'm bothered by that. So that's why I'm really interested to see what is going to happen with Nick Reiner and what his situation and what he did. And so he hasn't even gone to a preliminary hearing yet. He is they is anticipating that his preliminary hearing will be in September. Because just like with the David case, the prosecutors, and I find that interesting. I find that interesting that it was not a whole big deal and a whole bunch of controversy made behind the fact that the same district that decided to go this route and let the DA prosecute, bring the charges and the indictment against Nick Reiner, and they didn't make a big deal. They are making a big deal about the fact that they took the same route with the David situation. Because right now, these are two situations, it's the same thing. The DA's office are the ones who handed down the indictment. Well, they are to bring the charges or whatever. They skipped over the grand jury bringing the indictment, and so it's going to preliminary hearing. So I find it weird that you don't hear a lot of the media discussing the issues and the validity of the case, the validity of the investigation behind the Nick Reiner situation, but you hear so much uh, cloud cast, placed over how they went about getting and bringing David in to be indicted, right? But it's the same situation. But September is when they are anticipating that he's supposed to have his preliminary hearing. So this week, speaking of the Davis situation, okay? Hold on, let me see. You said, and remember how she did that first husband, but anyone who goes to jail for a wedding, right, exactly. She did that first husband horrible. Him and she just used him. And that's what I'm saying. She is not rehabilitated, and she really that's another person who needed some additional services. Like I feel like she's out here using those same things that her and the mama did. And now she got, like I said, now she got a baby of her own. And how is that going to translate? This a mess. That's another little thing I'll be following. But I think we're supposed to have a hearing, I think, this week with the Davis situation. This is supposed to be the hearing prior to the preliminary hearing. So we should have some kind of update. I haven't had an update the last couple of weeks about that. because I wanted to give it some time to let it die down. Most of the people that are still talking about it right now in the interim are talking about, the same conspiracies and different information that was floated during the time that this was being investigated. So a lot of it is stuff that any of us that were following this situation all the way through have heard before anyway. So I think the next thing is, I think it's the 12th. I think they said it was the 12th that we are supposed to have it's supposed to be a hearing. And this hearing is the one that's prior to the scheduled preliminary hearing. But remember, I told y'all, based on that Nick Reiner situation, I was saying don't be surprised if the defense does not ask for that preliminary hearing to be pushed back again. So we are thinking that we are going to have a preliminary hearing that is going to start at the end of May, but it could be possible that it could be another delay. So listen, you guys, I need to get off of here because I got to prepare something to be ready by 9 o'clock. So let me get off of here talking to you guys. I might be able to come back and talk to you guys later, but if not, I will talk to you soon. Y'all have a great day. Peace.